Thank you. So I'd too like to thank the organizers. Wonderful gathering and already a lot of food for thought. I'm not entirely certain what I have to say will completely agree with what Christy and Aaron have said, but I think it can be the basis of really constructive dialogue. My point of departure is Emily Carr's well-known and well-documented 1927 voyage east. Those of us from New Brunswick would question the degree to which it was east, but there you go. For the Canadian West Coast Art Exhibition, Native and Modern. For Carr, the exhibition and trip were a turning point in that she met the members of the group of 7. My interest lies with the way Carr reflected on gender after interacting with the group. In her journal, Carr asked herself if gender made a difference to what she hoped could be a common artistic cause. At first, she decided it did, but then quickly dismissed the thought and turned her attention to artistic skills that for her transcended gender. Let me quote her. "I wonder if these men feel as I do, that there is a common chord between us. No, I don't believe they feel so toward a woman. I'm way behind them in drawing and in composition and rhythm and planes." What I want to do is to explore Carr's statement because it captures the complicated gender dynamics and gender relations of an evolving artistic field in Canada. My argument is this: the development of an artistic field reorganized gender relations in the arts, but not completely. It displaced an older system of gender relations in the arts in that it was focused on an autonomous aesthetic. And this focus on an autonomous aesthetic opened up a cultural space within which women could develop careers as professional artists. Simultaneously, however, it did not and it could not eliminate sexism, with the result that women artists continued to encounter sexism in the arts even while their work could be lauded. Carr's life, it seems to me, can constitute an important case study into this development because, first of all, it is well documented. Second of all, it captures a period in the development of an artistic field in Canada. And thirdly, it can show us how one woman negotiated the changing gender dynamics of the arts, at times with what were to her ironic results. And I'd like to approach this case study into the gender relations of an artistic field in 3 parts. First of all, I'd like to define more precisely what constitutes an artistic field, a field of artistic production, as an analytic concept. Second, I'd like to discuss the changing social and economic relations in the arts that followed from it. And then thirdly, I'd like to explore some of the ways in which Carr negotiated these changing dynamics. So the concept of an artistic field, a field of artistic production, was developed by Pierre Bourdieu. Very briefly, we should note a number of characteristics of it. According to Bourdieu, society is divided into a series of interconnected and semi-autonomous fields. Fields operate according to a discrete set of rules that organize values and behaviors. Values and behaviors, etc., are sustained by institutions that enable and reinforce them. But fields are not homogeneous. Instead, they mimic the class nature of the society in which they're set. All fields maintain some form of currency that both circulates and can be accumulated. So, for example, the artistic field privileges both economic capital, money, and cultural capital, education, or taste. Finally, fields are not completely detached from society. Artists, for example, still need to eat and so need to go to the market and exchange currency for food. The result is that fields exist in a dynamic tension that pull them in at least 2 directions simultaneously, towards discrete values and modes of operation, and towards the values and socioeconomic dynamics of the society in which they are set. Now, the gendered implications of this, it seems to me, are important, and Bourdieu developed this concept before he became more engaged in developing an extensive analysis of gender. But for Bourdieu, even at the time that he developed these concepts, gender does not exist unto itself. it is always embedded in and interacts with other social practices that mark, for him, class distinctions. This suggests to me that we need to look at how gender works within a particular artistic form of social organization or social organization of the arts to maintain class structure, and how gender worked in the artistic field to both advance and to limit women's professional careers. One can think of the development of a Canadian artistic field as an historical process designed to organize the values of an autonomous aesthetic and to build the institutional structure that sustains it by making, within the artistic field, economic capital contingent on cultural capital. Its institutional structure develops over a long period of time and is never complete. It includes galleries, artist organizations, specialist periodicals, granting agencies, etc., all those things that seem to be under attack from the current government, as well as intermediaries like public intellectuals and art sellers. Gender is an important element of the artistic field for both theoretical and empirical reasons, and I've only hinted at some of the theoretical reasons, and we don't have time really to go over these. But what we can note empirically is that as an artistic field began to develop in Canada in the last decades of the 19th century, it engaged an already established social organization of the art in which gender figured prominently. In colonial and early Confederation era discourse, art was taken as a marker of civilization. The arts signified cultural refinement, grace, and elevated moral and aesthetic purpose. For example, the arts could be taken as a form of graciousness or refined taste that marked elite culture from more plebeian pastimes. For women, art was more normally construed as a means to an end, as opposed to an end in itself within the framework of this discourse. So, for example, etiquette books advised women to decorate using sedate watercolors as a sign of refinement, ensuring the individuality of expression that was so important in 20th century art and for Emily Carr. Girls' academies reiterated the same message. They taught various arts, but the goal was to produce refined women for whom art was a decorative or leisure pursuit conducted within the context of a patriarchal family. As Ottawa's Congregation de Notre-Dame educational establishment for girls explained, and I'll quote them, "The object of the school is to give such instruction to the students that they can go into the kitchen and cook a dinner, and from thence to the drawing room and entertain guests." In terms of a market, no one would suggest that colonial era Canada, early Confederation era, had a vibrant art market. Male artists deployed a variety of means to earn a living, and there was what social historians have called occupational pluralism going on as one of the main sort of things, and you can certainly see that in Carr's life. Women professional artists occupied, I would argue, a tertiary market position behind that of European art and Canadian male artists, or as Susanna Moody explained in Roughing It in the Bush, they disguised their participation in the market by having a male relative claim credit for their creative work. It was this social organization of the arts that was displaced over time and incompletely by a developing artistic field. The field began with self-organization, Ontario Society of Artists, and elite patronage, the Royal Canadian Academy and National Gallery of Canada. Its construction continued into at least the 1950s with the increased state intrusion into art markets via the Canada Council and a variety of other means. The aim was to increase the status of Canadian artists by detaching artistic production from the logic of a free market. Ideologically, in effect, it decoupled art from the idea of an elevated culture and linked it to a self-referential aesthetic. This historical process carried with it a complicated variety of gendered implications, some of which we heard in the opening keynote yesterday. But it was a development that Carr innately supported. She was involved in the construction of an artistic field in a variety of ways, say her involvement with the British Columbia Society of Fine Arts or the failed People's Gallery project in Victoria, that contributed to this idea. Her limited public statements connected the idea of art to personal expression and what she called a fresh way of seeing. After 1927, she benefited from an evolving Canadian artistic field through connections with a supportive network of like-minded artists and intellectuals, as well as her integration into an evolving national network that circulated her work and provided new markets. For Carr, however, the developing artistic field was not simply a story of triumph. It produced a complex series of gender relations in the arts that she found both troubling and confusing. Sexism, for instance, did not disappear. During the course of her frequently interrupted education, Carr encountered male instructors who gave her little time because she was a woman. She encountered segregated art classes. Her father's executor, for example, as well, called her home from her first educational trip to California, telling her that she had played at art long enough. And, as is well known, she firmly believed that sexism lurked behind A.Y. Jackson's criticism of her work. Carr responded to sexism in a variety of ways. One strategy was mobility, for example, leaving a sexist teacher for one who treated her seriously. Another strategy was to assert women's rights, as she did in 1908 when she insisted that the British Columbia Society of Fine Arts have at least one woman on its hanging committee. She also committed herself to getting the best criticism and instruction she could find, which is why she went to Paris to continue her education. Finally, she did try to seek out the company of women. She described her relationship with Sophie Frank as follows. I'll quote her. "Her love for me is real and mine for her. There is a bond between us where color, creed, environment don't count. The woman in us meets on common ground and we love each other," end quote. But Carr also discovered that her commitment to art could create antagonistic relations with other women and positive relations with men. Her commitment to art as an ideal and a profession led her into conflict with women who did not share these same goals. As Carr's biographers note, her relationship in England, when she was there studying with other female students, was often strained because Carr believed they were more interested in social graces and meeting men than in the arts. As a teacher in Vancouver, she encountered the same problem with a group that she referred to as the Ladies' Art Club. Carr viewed these, quote, society women, as she called them, as dabblers, more interested in frivolity and passing time, and she condemned their tea drinking and chatter before they decided to part company. This same commitment undoubtedly stood at the root of her close connection to Lauren Harris and periodically to Marius Barbeau. The irony of this situation was not lost on Carr, as she wrote later in life to Ira Dilworth, another significant influence in her life. Quote, "I find my hoarded letters are from men. I was supposed to be a man, quote, man-hater, double explanation point, heh heh. I learned more from men," I like that, I will say, yeah. "I learned more from men, touched them closer, have been touched deeper by them than by women. Queer me," end quote. There was then a deep ambiguity to Carr's gender relations within the arts that became evident, I will suggest by way of conclusion, in her loneliness. Loneliness is, of course, one of the dominant themes of Carr's life, and her biographers have wondered at this over the years. In some ways, she clearly wasn't lonely. She maintained an extensive correspondence, traveled widely, had frequent visitors, and numerous invitations, a lot of which she discarded. What upset her and what made her lonely, she explained to her friend Nan Cheney, was an absence of true artists in her life. I'll quote her again. "So I plod along by lonesome and often wish there were other interested spirits about," end quote. There can be little doubt that during Carr's life and long afterwards, that the profession of an artist demanded more of women than men. Many of the men who Carr associated with managed both a public and a private life, even if not always well. And think of Lauren Harris there. Once Carr made the decision to commit herself to art as a career, a married life, and the potential companionship that could have brought with it appeared out of the question. As she wrote to Dilworth, "I think maybe men got art in a deeper sense than women. Women got so split up, following the careers of their children and chasing around following their husbands. But men have absorbed more books and thoughts with other men." End quote. But just to complete the circle of Carr's problems, men's sexism could limit connections with her. It was not just that men could begrudge women's success, as Carr believed Jackson did with her, but that they tended to judge women on their physical appearance as opposed to their talent or intellect. "Why," she asked Dilworth in another letter, "do men choose dolls for wives?" Isolated from society women, but also from most men, Carr both stuck to her ideas and retreated socially. She found her greatest contentment among other socially marginalized groups, original peoples, in whose villages she seemed truly happy, and children, who she credited with more creativity than adults. Whatever else the development of an artistic field did, and it did many things, it created for Carr a system of gender relations in the arts that she could never fully master. What her life shows us, I am suggesting, is that her efforts to do precisely this are an important element of the lived experience of art in modern Canada. Thank you.